All right, let's have a look at our deck list because, again, like I said, this feature match is an absolute banger. Kicking things off with a deck and a player we know and love. Prismaticism and Annie are still here after top 8ing in Lille, looking to do the same again a week later here in Atlanta.
Yeah, this is obviously a deck and a player that I am very much impressed by. A big believer. Prismaticism has a background from Legends of Runeterra as well, just a very decorated card game player, no matter what game they pick up. In Riftbound in particular, has had a number of top 8s, I believe it was top 4 in Lille, and I think that this is going to be the event where they finally go the distance and get the win.
Yeah, I know there weren't too many changes to the list, but I believe if my memory serves, one of the changes I have noticed between his version of the deck in Lille, where he won Best of, and this, is that I believe he added one more Rek'Sai Breacher, going from 2 to 3, clearly liking that card. And you know who else likes that card? Everyone else. In fact, the Lille list had 3 because everyone else likes it. You know why? It's sold out in the hall, Charmer. There are none left. I talked to at least 2 deals yesterday that were sold out. Turns out the hall is just done. There are no more Rek'Sai Breachers left to buy.
Yeah, I think when this card was originally revealed, everyone focused on just the Rek'Sai package and the number of ways where you get to look at cards, maybe banish one, play it, etc., and then this would give accelerate to those. But the reality is it works on your chosen champions, it works on the mechs created from Ferris Forerunner. There's a lot of potential value to be gained from this, and it just has accelerate on its own.
Very, very good all things around. But let's have a look at the other deck list now because his opponent is another very good player. A champion of a previous regional qualifier, Dhawally, is back in the same domains that won him Houston, but on a different legend. Draven, his choice for this event.
Yeah, Draven obviously still considered the top of the mountain even after the bans, right? Most represented deck here, second most represented deck in Lille, has incredible conversion rates. Again, we've seen a lot of players on Draven in that top 16 graphic we were looking at earlier. I know that earlier, though, when we were talking about these two players, you had brought something to light, which is the fun fact that Dhawally won in Houston on who?
Annie.
Okay, and Prismaticism was on who?
Draven, won Best of there in Vegas.
And they have swapped spots.
You know, just, I mean, turns out they both like these domains. I think that we can figure that out as much. Both pretty good decks, but it is fun to see them swap their legends. Only 2 Rek'Sai Breacher here for Dhawally. Clearly couldn't find a third one in the hole. Sold out a little too swiftly, but triple Gem are kind of a fun one. I think we're seeing quite a bit more of this card. It's just a very solid play you can have on the early turns, being only 2 energy, but giving units ganking, turns out that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think that when you're deck building and you want to include 2-costed units, you want ones that are hopefully versatile into the late game. Obviously, Overzealous Fan is a staple, but cards like Tide Turner have also been around. And then, of course, we have now Gem Jammer entering the fray, because if you draw it later in the game, you can still find use from the when play trigger. And I think that that is what has really made it rise in the ranks as far as considering during your deck building.
All right, let's head on down to the featurement area because it is 2 titans of the game about to play each other for what could be a spot in the top 8. Again, I have not done the math yet. I will not be doing it. That will be someone else's job. I don't know what the stakes are on this match, but I do know if you want to make top 8, the best thing you can do is just keep on winning. And one of these players, one of these very good players, is about to pick up their 2nd loss in this regional qualifier.
Now, this is actually a very interesting statistic that I'm seeing on the screen right now, which is that Annie versus Draven was pretty close to 50% in Lille, a little favored toward Draven with 47% win rate on the Annies, but has dropped significantly here at Atlanta. And the only thing that I can think of is that some of the tech that players were including to potentially battle Azir, and that deck coming out faster, is also impacting this Annie matchup, almost catching strays, if you will, because of Azir's sins. Yeah,
I also wonder how many Annies potentially entered the field after Prismaticism made top 8 in Lille. And we'll have a look at this Game 1 battlefield here. It is Seed of Power versus Zorn Warrens, Prismaticism on Annie, Dhawally on Draven, swapping things over. But I do have a little fun fact for the battlefield that I did note. One of them has Arena's Greatest and the other one has Aspirant's Climb. So I wonder, when do you decide to take that one out? Because I think the Aspirant's Climb player probably wants to find the Arena's Greatest, and the Arena's Greatest probably wants to dodge the climb, if that makes sense.
No, I think it's actually the reverse. Okay. So Boulevard, who we also know is performing well in this event, had said that specifically they were trying to play greatest when they were going first, because if their opponent is going second, that's usually when they want to deploy climb, and they're just trying to deny the value that climb gives them.
Right, so okay, so it's reverse. So Draven wants to have the climb be uncontested, and Prismaticism wants to find the climb and the arena's greatest in the same game. That makes sense. Overzealous Fang going to kick things off. Looks like it is Annie on the play. I'm going to have to be very careful about which legend is which, because they are very similar looking sometimes, obviously in the same domains, and often play quite a lot of the same cards. But Gem Jammer going to be the early drop of choice here for Dhawally as things get passed back, and first player on the board is going to be Prismaticism. And turns out that Annie legend ability, is that the best of Annie just chilling, by the way?
It certainly does look like that is the case, likely the one that was gained from Leal.
I don't know why that didn't strike me, but yeah, I mean, it's probably been a week. He got given the card when he was in Leal. Just bringing it over. Yeah,
I think it just
that in the Legend Zone.
I think it just stands out because none of the other cards we've seen so far are featuring the bling. That was actually something I was going to point out. Traditionally, with League, you always say skins get wins, and we see a lot of those incredibly beautiful foiled out full art runes, but these are two very decorated players just rocking the base runes here, and so far base versions of each card. Again, just wanting to focus on the gameplay. But there is that best of Annie out there, so it really stands out.
They just give you the card. I guess you use it, you know. Stack deck going to be resolved here by Prismaticism. Having a look at the rest of the hand, I see a flash. I see a Noxus Hopeful, which has already had its Legion effect online, thanks to Stack Deck being the first spell of this turn. Ride the Wind, one of the other cards in the hand. I couldn't quite catch the fourth one.
Yeah, I couldn't see it either. I was trying to see if I could get a gleam.
I guess which battlefield?
Yeah, this is interesting. If you don't like your hand, Warrens might make sense just to get the filter.
I will say Prismaticism, definitely a very deliberate player, one very thoughtful.
Also, it's a consideration where if you think for whatever reason you're going to be forced into combat, you might want to force your opponent away from Zon Warrens, so that could have been a consideration. Instead, opting just to pass, doesn't want to go to either battlefield. I also like this. You face your opponent to make the decision first, and then on the next turn, when you go for your own double conquer, potentially, you'll be able to get both the Warrens trigger and the Seat of Power, so just kind of maximizing your value without putting anything in danger.
I can tell you that my little read from that situation, I do really like the patience here. I think often players just rush onto the battlefield without giving it too much thought, and that is, I would say, more often than not the correct play, but not always the correct play. And I think that's something that's important to note in Riftbound. Just because the points are there for you to grab doesn't mean you need to take them yet. Sometimes you want to do a little bit more setup. I think especially against a deck like Draven, where when you are wrong about the combat outcome, you get punished as Kai'Sa's Survivor. Going to be the play. No accelerate, though.
I was just about to say, I would not be surprised if Dhawally develops and also passes, because these are two players that understand that even numbers are the important numbers when it comes to points. Getting that 1 point is kind of inconsequential compared to getting 2, and it's exacerbated by the presence of Seat of Power because you also want that card draw. Neither of these players wanted to give up a unit from early exchanges unnecessarily, and Prismaticism strikes first, and not just with the double conquer, but with a big reinforce with that Ferris Forerunner on the Warrens, which is, of course, trying to deny that trigger.
Well, Chama, I have a rules question for you that I don't know what the answer is. I'm not sure if you do, but I trust you for many things. If Overzealous Fan gets sacrificed and pushes a unit out, does that mean Draven has won a combat?
I don't believe so, because that unit isn't present to win the combat at the battlefield any longer. You win a combat by having units at the battlefield at the end of every.
All right, so I like the thing, that makes sense. And the reason I like this maneuver actually is that you're reinforcing the battlefield that you want to hold down. The most Ferris Forerunner is, I would say, at its best when you reinforce it somewhere else. And obviously, again, you do not want to lose combats to Draven and give those bonus cards away. And yes, Prismaticism, thanks to Annie's Legend ability, is holding up 2 runes as well, which could be a number of different tricks at his disposal. But the fan just sitting there is not going to... It will likely give Kai'Sa a card draw if Dhawally wants to go over the top there and get the conquer and the point, but it will not be giving an extra card thanks to Draven winning a combat.
Well, that is also assuming that the fan doesn't just ship it back. So I think we're actually going to see Dhawally go in the other direction. Maybe this is signaling something like a cleave or a rebuke, maybe.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't seem fun to go up there, so do want to contest, but Dhawally doing the thing that decks usually don't like to do, which is run into the Forerunner, which could mean one of two things. You just have to do it, and the grimace on the face that I can kind of glean maybe is that, or there's a rebuke.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It might be the rebuke for the Forerunner. I think that makes the most sense. You want to do this now while you have all of these runes available so that you can play around Hard Bargain, because we've seen that have some very effective blowout options. Instead, Prismaticism goes with the Flash, and that gets hit with the Hard Bargain from the side of Dhawally. So as I was just talking about playing around Hard Bargain for the blowouts, it's actually Dhawally using it to make sure the rebuke goes off. And that's really going to slow down the pace that Prismaticism had set.
Yeah, a lot of players have actually been taking the Hard Bargain specifically against Draven in these domains. There's a lot of spells that can be tough to hit. Rebuke's the obvious one, right? Can be tough to hit with something like a Defy, but a little bit easier to hit with something like Hard Bargain. And I believe in the main, Dhawally only has one and Prismaticism has two. So a very big win there in that combat. Kai'Sa does go down thanks to the Hopeful having 4 might, so no extra card draw from the Conquer, from Kai'Sa, but the card draw from Draven nonetheless, and the card draw and the bit of filtering from Zorn Warrens.
Yeah, that's the thing of one-ofs in lists that can sometimes be tilting as a player, because it's very hard to always play around it. You have to assume mathematically they're less likely to have it this early in the game. But when they do find it, it's such a blowout because of that exact reason, right? You're kind of not expecting them to have it. And as you pointed out, Prismaticism is running 2. That's just because Annie's always essentially guaranteed to have those 2 energy available for it. It makes sense to kind of increase your copies, but Dhawally getting the initial benefit of that Hard Bargain exchange. And I think now the question for Dhawally is this going to be a reinforced Hopeful to try to, defend on that Warrens against something like an accelerated Kai'Sa, or is it going to go in base? And I like this play. I think that jamming it on the top just leaves you open to too many counterplay options.
And that flashy sword that did get hit with the Hard Bargain, that is one of the centerpieces of this deck as Ferris Forerunner comes back on down the other side this time. You know what? Didn't have so much fun. Obviously can't reinforce a battlefield you don't occupy. So the same play, but just in the top side this time, as Ferris Forerunner joins Overzealous Fan. And if there is a board state you don't want to look at when thinking about going to a battlefield, that is probably the one I like the least.
Yeah, and as you had pointed out, Ferris Forerunner significantly more effective when it's used from a reinforcement standpoint. Playing it into base, obviously it's still a great unit, not the end of the world, but in this particular matchup where you are trying to race in points, and in this particular instance, while normally the even points matters more often, you've kind of entered this weird stalemate of both players sitting on one spot. You want to hunker down, ensure that you can hold this location off and continue to score points so that you maintain that point lead until you can get back on track. This makes an awful lot of sense.
Certainly does. And 3-2 now is the point score here. Prismaticism getting the hold point thanks to the Overzealous Fan being ignored in the earlier exchange. So, as you said, the points race is currently favoring Annie, which does make sense for the player that went first, but still plenty of play left in these games. There are ride the winds in these decks. There are plenty of accelerate units. We talked about Rek'Sai Breacher a lot already. Lots of ways to kind of get back on the board and try and get a conquer. The tricky thing is that Ferris Forerunner tends to make that quite troublesome. And 2 runes is good, but for this any deck in particular, 3 is even better when you're thinking about tricks that Prismaticism could have.
Yeah, it is something to keep an eye on as the game drags out, because Breacher, as far as activations on your chosen champion, is going to be far more impactful on the Dhawally side. That Draven, giving it accelerate once it enters play in that like 8 might range, is big enough to go over top of even the Forerunners. We're not quite there yet, but you know what else is pretty good? Darius.
Darius pretty good. Just develops the Darius and says go, wanting to build up a little bit more might. Draven often happy to store up some might and then crash in with big numbers to try and win those combats, keep the card draw flowing and retake control of the game. And he kind of getting under a lot of that. Again, always readying 2 runes, always having a trick available. We've seen Flash, we know about Rebuke. Talked about hard bargain, but the one I was alluding to earlier with Druins is, of course, Rengar. One of the very exciting additions to this list. A very unique combat trick is Ride the Wind over to the other side. Not going to draw a card from the Cedar Power, but is going to get to discard and draw things to Zorn Warrants, and maybe more critically, gets an extra point out of the deal as well. And back to base we go.
And I was about to say, and I think the reason that Ride the Wind was the choice here is because it moves readied. You can safely go back to base. You see Dhawally setting up. If you're watching at home and you're trying to figure out how you navigate around what your opponent is doing, Dhawally played that Darius the previous turn and simply passed. What that signals to Prismaticism is that Dhawally is trying to develop enough might where he feels comfortable and confident to go in and win these combats. And if that is their game plan, score the points you can and then safely bring your units back and now put Dhawally in the position that you were just in. So now if Dhawally wants to keep pace on points, has to put some of these units on the battlefield, but then will be facing the wrath of a Prismaticism counterattack the following turn.
You know what the fun part is? It might even be bigger than it looks, because I talked about Rengar, which is usually something you play when battlefields are getting assaulted, but you get an action window. In a lot of different cases. You could just chuck Rengar in your base if you need a little bit more might on the following turn.
Absolutely.
All right.
This is going to be a very critical exchange here.
See pretty good cards in Dhwally's hand, I will say. Falling Star, Ferrous Forerunner are the first two cards at the top of that hand. We've already talked at length about how good Forerunner is. So Gem Jam is going to get the party started, and Prismaticism just says, you got it. 3 points now for the Draven player, still trailing by 2. But not in range just yet for either player, not at that critical 6 that we've seen in so many different games. And this is not a climb game, so we are playing to regulation as Rek'Sai Breacher hits the discard thanks to Zorn Warrens, draws an extra card, and Darius might as well take the draw, but again, can't spread yourself too thin. There is a lot of might at home. Prismaticism clearly resigned to letting this turn happen.
So sequencing, obviously really important here with the Darius, though. You can go in, get the draw, and there has, I was going to say, not had the activation played quite yet, so there is the option to play your second card, ready the Darius, and bring it back if that's what you're fearing.
I think it's a nice little thing about Darius we sometimes forget, is that it's so often just played basically as a unit that has Accelerate, right, or a form of Accelerate. You play it as a second card, or you play it and then a second card, and you wake it up and charge on in. The reverse, as you noted, does also work. And Tide Turner actually going to make that, well, I guess it's a bit unnecessary to do it this way, but you could flip the Tide Turner back if you wanted to. Ferrous Forerunner coming down as well. Don't miss your Darius trigger. I guess we haven't played 2 cards.
Yeah, this would be the second card.
You won't miss it. He's good. There we go. Yep. Flips it on back. Ferrous Forerunner coming down. And once again, the same decision. Where is Ferrous Forerunner going? To base or to the battlefield? And as we've said, the battlefield is often the place it wants to be at, and Dhawally's not quite sure. To base he goes.
Yeah. And again, this is that situation previously where Prismaticism had identified Dhawally was building in base, so pulled back, and now Dhawally, recognizing Prismaticism, has all of this might and is trying to establish, a reconquer or to potentially take advantage of any units that are left on an island by Dhawally. So Dhawally says, I don't want to lose to anything that I don't have to, and I don't know what you have. So I'm just going to play my best unit back in the base and set up for a retake, if you will, because Prismaticism was only on 5 points. We've talked about it ad nauseum, but 5 is just not as good as 6. Those even numbers are more important. Prismaticism does end up sending the fan up top, so we'll go to 7.
Curious what the end game setup here is for Prismaticism, because we're in range now, right? Can't win this turn, but can win on the following turn, either by double conquering or by holding. Holding, typically, especially in these domains, a little less likely, and as we can see, Dhawally has plenty of might available for combats.
So end of this turn, what I would expect is one of 2 things. The first is either a lot of might on both locations with runes up so that you can just have combat tricks and say, okay, come at me, because you have to take both locations, I'm at 7. Or it could be a situation where it was a lot of might on one side and looks like this is going to be the case, and an overzealous fan on the other, because that essentially means you either have to have removal for the fan or you have to send 2 units there because you can ship 1 back. So that is the case. We have all of the runes available for Prismaticism, almost all of the might on Warrens, and then the one fan on the top side on that Seat of Power.
Yeah, I really like this setup here. I think just threatening, and again, even if the exchange happens, Dhawally manages to get there and everything's all good, can still have a unit to roll into on battlefield. Only need one more to try and conquer. So a very tough situation. And Dhawally, on the other side, cannot win this turn. 4 points is well out of range for a double conquer to win you this game.
And the real pickle that Dhawally's in is, let's just say hypothetically, Dhawally has what it takes to get through both locations. It's not going to happen without a pretty great expenditure of resources, both in terms of cards from hand and energy, but also units on the board. If that's the case, because of the Forerunner that's on the Warrens, Prismaticism is still going to have a healthy number of units to attempt a retake the following turn. But Dhawally, having a very timely Bryn here Thundersong here, is going to put Prismaticism in a bit of a pickle, because now any reactions that you want to play have to be done in this window.
Yeah, and it can only be reactions. So flashing back on Noxus Hopeful and Ferris Forerunner. The fan is going to stay there. I like this. It kind of puts him in the same situation. And Bryn here, clearly a card that Dhawally thought was quite good in this metagame. Has 2 copies in his main deck. So liking this effect a lot, given how many different decks with good cards we've seen that you want to try and stop. Aurelia kind of being one of the premium ones, but very good in the mirror, very good in this matchup as well. So the flash is there to save the units, with Priz is back on the I must double conquer plan, which I think is totally fine. And again, as you mentioned, these Overzealous fans, they might be small, but they are going to force additional units to be committed over, which is just really annoying.
Yeah, absolutely. Dhawally will now likely successfully take both locations, but because Prismaticism had the exact answer in Flash to save the 2 units when the Bryn here came down, before I was talking about if it's other things, you might have the mech tokens left over for a retake, but here, if Bryn here is coming down, you just pull everything back and say, all right, you're going to have to get me off of these locations, but that's going to strand your units, and then in doing so, I will likely be able to retake the next turn as well. And this is a very critical falling star to get rid of that second overzealous fan so that it's not going to push something back.
Yeah, first fan pushed back the Titana. Would have traded, but decided that, might as well just push. I think denies an action window potentially is a reason to do that. Although, I'm not sure there's much Dhawally would want to cast there. I don't think it mostly matters at the end of the day. Forerunner though, rumbling on in. And again, nothing to do here, because even if Priz had other spells he maybe wanted to play, Bryn here's effect is still live. So 2 more points, now at 6, now threatening to win on the other side.
It also, here's the interesting thing. It also was a bit of a check for whether or not...
Oh, Rebuke is going to be a game. Yep. Doesn't even bother doing anything else. Already knows that the game is over. The second Rebuke, very timely there out of Prismaticism, and that is game number 1 going to Annie in the battle for which legend is better in these very dominant domains.
Yeah, I was about to say it was going to be a check for whether or not Prismaticism felt comfortable with the exchange, but Bryn here is making it so that there's no interaction available anyway. I was going to say it was potentially a check for hard bargain, but even at the reaction speed, it turns out you can't play counter spells through Bryn here.
Nope.
That
makes sense. You don't want to lose to a spinning axe and actually have the Titan on the battlefield, so just pushing it away, making sure it can't get there. That was its job to begin with. As we move on over to game number 2, it is Zorn Warrens again, but this time on Priz's side, and Targon's Peak for Dhawally's Draven, which means the final game is going to be Climb versus Arena's Greatest if we get there, with Priz going first, because winning the first game, it gives you the luxury of choosing whether you want to go first or second in the final game.
Yeah, and again, I feel like the Arena's Greatest inclusions are really just trying to deny the Aspirant's Climb slowing things down. So recognizing you've won game 1, Dhawally's going to likely be on the play, so you roll out your other battlefield, and then on the following one, if there is a game 3, you've got the Greatest that will counter the Climb. And this is a great turn 1 play from Prismaticism, stacked deck into a Hopeful, and then because you're Annie, you get to have 2 runes ready to go. That's about as good as you can start when you are going second.
Yeah, we talked about Darius getting stuff done with Seal Captain on the play, which is a very fast start. This is pretty close to one of the faster ones you can get, especially going second. So 4 Might already, but 4 Might answered on the other side. Gem Jammer and Noxus Hopeful hanging out on the Targon's Peak together.
And if you're watching at home, just a little bit of shortcutting there. Dhawally paid full for the Hopeful, but then readied because of Peak. This is beautiful from Prismaticism coming in.
There's the cat. Rengar pouncing into play. Is attacking, so Assault 2 for... So it's a 5 Might unit rumbling on it, and there is only 6 Might here. So do you want to kill the 5 or the 4? I have to think the bigger number is the better answer, but 4 static Might is also pretty annoying.
Yeah, the interesting choice here is whether or not you think you're going to have like a Falling Star that could clean up the Rengar later. There's that breakpoint difference of 3 versus 4 for those effects. Rengar offensively, as you pointed out, represents more Might, so Dhawally decided to go with that, but it was not necessarily, I think, an easy decision. I think your hand state is going to dictate a lot of that choice.
Also, it takes the peak and gets double any legend activation, basically. Readying all the runes after recycling the 5th for that Rengar, and it is a setup turn once again. Darius, go. Dhawally going to have to play patient, and as we saw, when Annie gets ahead on tempo, feels like a deck that can keep it quite consistently.
And it's even better for the Annie player when these early takes still result in the hold point after. So as the Merchant moves in on the other side, we're going to get a lot of filtering triggered for Prismaticism, but also go up to 3 points, and that's going to allow the Hopeful to go back, and then a Forerunner. We've seen them all day long.
I'm getting deja vu. This is exactly the setup that Priz had basically in game 1, and he's going second in this one. But it seems to be the plan is, you know what, play my early units, try and get some things happening, take control of a battlefield, and then move one of my smaller units on, and then plop a Forerunner next to it, and see what your opponent has to deal with it. Darius, a pretty formidable unit in combat, but Forerunner is just so annoying. Whether it is beating you in combat, or if you're taking it out or trading with it. So much might, so much value generated with this sneaky little Spirit Forge rare.
Yeah, the thing about this as well is that this is the 2nd game in a row that Prismaticism was the first person to develop a Forerunner on a battlefield. And that is so important, I think, in this matchup. You get not just the point lead because you're obviously on the battlefield, but you create this additional hurdle that your opponent has to go over, spend a bunch of resources to do so. In this case, it's going to be a Rebuke. Again, a little bit of deja vu. But you know it's just coming back next turn. There's still the Hopeful. And we saw this again. Is there the hard bargain?
Yep. Yes. All right. I promise you, folks, this is a different game. This is game 2. All right. The battlefields are different. Check the tapes. Even though a lot of the exchanges that we've seen already have happened, this is a different game. Darius will successfully conquer the battlefield, fell the Merchant with his big old axe, and push Dhawally up to 2 points. Still, again, a little bit behind, but Prismaticism losing the big Forerunner that he developed. Now, Dhawally can't do the same and reinforce this Darius battlefield with that unit because only 3 runes left after the exchange, but have to feel pretty good about snagging a flash 2 games in a row that was protecting a Forerunner.
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes when you consider these are 2 very decorated players that have navigated almost the exact same game back-to-back. That tells me that they both have a game plan. They know what works. They're 10-1 for a reason, and they're sticking to their script. And it just so happens that script replays almost verbatim in 2 different games, but it works, right? We saw a very effective game from Prismaticism in game 1. Dhawally was doing everything available to try to overcome it. It's the same thing game 2. Prismaticism gets the early start. Dhawally tries to overcome it. We get the Rebuke. We have the backed-up hard bargain. The real question now is, does it continue to play out like game 1? Or with this Tide Turner, we see Darius come back to base. It's the 2nd card played. Because of that, Darius readies from base and then goes to the other side, and now Dhawally has closed the points gap. Yeah,
I really like that. Very cute little play. Tide Turner is so tricksy sometimes, but you can kind of see it as a way to ready your unit as long as you do some extra steps. You have to do some thinking, have to think about what different abilities it's maybe comboing with, but in effect here, re-readied the Darius for the base and then got Darius to move on over. So our Hopeful's going to move on in. 3 runes open and available, but Prismaticism going to start at the easier of the 2 battlefields to take look to try and win this fight with 4 might to 2 and go up to 4 points. The points are even, but again, back on tempo for Priz here, able to take the next 2 points potentially before Dhawally can do so. So what does Draven have to stop this assault? And even if he does have something, does he want to commit it now? Because resources are running a little bit low here, and there's still quite a bit of game left to play.
Yeah, this worked out a little bit in Prismaticism's favor just because if this combat is successful, the Zon Warrens would allow some additional filtering to find some answers, but we do have the Spinning Axe answered by the Longsword, a card that I love in Annie.
Very nicely done. +3 for the Axe. That makes it, I don't know my brain. That makes it 5 to 4, and then +2 for the Longsword makes it 6 to 5, so Priz wins that combat. By the way, I believe one of the only changes made according to production who were in my ear just before when we overdecked this, it was -1 Mind Splitter +1 Longsword. So I don't know which Longsword that was, but that one came in clutch to win that combat, get the Zone Warrens trigger happening, and get the game moving in the right direction for the Annie player. Annie herself going to make an appearance, and there's a flash. I'll take that right on back.
Yeah, Prismaticism, I think, hoping that Dhawally didn't have additional hard bargains in the sideboard, says, okay, you've got it twice. I'm still going to utilize this flash, which was, honestly, in my opinion, I think the game winner for Prismaticism in game 1, being able to save all that might when the Bryn here came down. That allowed for the retakes on the following turn. It's a powerful card for a reason. It's in the Annie deck in Proving Grounds for a reason. It's kind of the go-to answer. Because right now, what you're saying to Dhawally is, I have units on this other side. If you don't come over here, I'll take the hold point. And if you do, and I can't win the combat, then I will just run away, and you spent all those resources to get the job done.
Yeah, I think it's funny with how much DNA these two decks share. And they do have a lot of overlap as far as cards they are playing. Really, the backbone of Prismaticism Annie deck to me is Flash. This is a Flash deck. This is a deck that wants to utilize Paris Forerunner, like many of the Fury decks in the field, but also just the power of Flash and how it combines with Annie's Legend ability. So 4 points to 4, but again, Dhawally's still just a little bit behind, like a step behind on the point tempo, which is sometimes enough in a game like Riftbound. It's been scrappy as both players are kind of going back and forth, trying to get, just a single point. We're not even getting increments of 2 cleanly here because there's so much interaction that happens in these combats. But Dhawally going to move Darius on back, and perhaps it's another development turn here. 6 runes available. That could be a Forerunner, but don't think we're getting through the topside battlefield this turn at least.
Well, I think Dhawally's taken their time trying to figure this out simply because there was a scenario where you could bring the Darius back, play 2 cards, Darius readies, and then maybe if you also had a cleave or something like that, you could try to contest. The problem with that is, even if you're expecting Prismaticism to flash back, that could have been bait, and then you could have answered with a rebuke on the Darius instead. So Dhawally, I think, rightfully says this is just a development turn. Prismaticism is only going to hold up to 5, which is not 6, so I can get something in play and then kind of regroup.
And 5 points is good, but first Forerunner back on the battlefield where he belongs. That little Yordle in the giant mech being pretty fearsome, even with Darius and Kai'Sa, 2 very powerful cards from Origins, sitting in base ready for combat with Dhawally. And again, this is a very tough fork to try and navigate because, like you mentioned, there is Flash. Everybody knows there's a Flash in hand. But is it bait? Could be. How much worse can it get for you? Even if it isn't, what do you actually do if you move in and they flash a unit? Which units do they flash? Are you trading something away? Like,
yeah,
you're forcing Dhawally to ask you questions, and you have answers ready to go. And this is, I feel like Prismaticism is in the point where most players in this kind of matchup want to be. They are the one dictating the pace of the game, and Dhawally is still trying to play catch-up, even though it's a point between these 2 players. Feels like the tempo is still in Priz's favor, and I appreciate how dynamic Prismaticism is with his units. Moving Annie back doesn't do anything really on that battlefield, being a bit of extra might, so might as well leave it open to threaten a potential conquer as Dhawally. Going to go bottom here to the Targon's Peak and try and pick up a point. And Prismaticism says, that's fine, that point doesn't win the game, I'll give that one over.
One of the, I think, most frustrating things when you're trying to play against Annie is really just figuring out exactly what card they're holding up for. In this case, obviously, we know there's a flash in hand from the Annie, but just in general, because so much of the deck is built around these really powerful, combat-oriented 2 energy cards, when you're going into any location, you have to say, is it a flash? Is it a rebuke? Do they have a hard bargain for whatever my trick is? Is it a ride the wind so that they can hop over to the other location and then score on my turn? Because as we pointed out, yes, Prismaticism is at 5, which is not 6, but you can very quickly jump to 6 on your opponent's turn with a ride the wind. So
we're going in because without that spinning axe, the might battle just was in favor of Priz, and it could just be the flash, could also just be a Rengar, and I did spot a rebuke in hand. Darius, I believe, should have 2 more mites, so has been readied. Yep, we're going to represent here with the die. So that is was base 7 plus 5 is 11. No, that's not right. 7 plus 4 is the math. 7 plus 4 is 11, plus 3
should be
is 14. So it's 14 playing 12 right now. And we'll see how it works out, because I did see that rebuke in Prismaticism's hand. So what do you think Dhawally has? What do I want to commit here? Flash feels like the safest play, but it doesn't necessarily feel like the play that advances the game to the point you want it to.
Yeah, this is... do I take the safe play, or do I say, I don't think you have another hard bargain? You've got me twice with it. I'm going to go with the rebuke. But instead, just doesn't commit anything, is fine with losing the battle, but getting might off the board for Dhawally because of the mech tokens coming in. Again, this is the power of Ferris Forerunner. Dhawally commits resources to get that location, but as far as net might goes, Prismaticism only loses 4 to effectively get rid of Kaisa on the other side, which is a very big trade.
I believe, yep, Dhawally is at 6 points. That was the thing I was looking for. So Prismaticism cannot win on this turn, and Dhawally is now in kind of the endgame spot where he can try and navigate his way to scoring it twice and getting those last few points to take us to game number 3. But I was going to mention, as you kind of alluded to, that Forerunner is also just fine with trading. So taking a unit out there, making that spinning axe have to be reattached if Dhawally wants to keep it, which if you attach to either of these units is going to be a massive blowout with Rebuke, which doesn't feel all that good. And again, your units are still under threat. They are not particularly safe at the battlefields. And the axe is going to be committed here. Recycling a rune, making that Darius even bigger. And what else is left here? Looking at those mechs, it's 9 might at home plus the 2 from the longsword. So 11 total available. Titan are not looking all that hot as far as defending, but Darius looking relatively imposing at the Zone Warrens.
So now the decision-making puzzle is put on Prismaticism because you cannot allow both locations to go. You have to conquer at least one to just not lose the game. Yep. But it goes beyond that as well, because if you leave one location up, then they only have to conquer the other. And we've already seen Darius move around a lot with these Tide Turner tricks. And there is obviously accelerate units or more Dariuses potentially in the hand of Dhawally. So you're really only safe if you go for, in my opinion, some sort of double conquer or double answer. So even if Prismaticism goes in, yeah, I was going to say, we might see something like an offensive rebuke here, even though that doesn't feel great because the Darius goes to hand and then can ready when it comes back down. You just still have to force Dhawally into a position where they have to commit the resources to do so. You want to limit their options on the crackback turn.
Yeah, this is 8 on 8. So I think Prismaticism has passed. And like I said, I know there's a rebuke in his hand. So I think he's just saying, you know what? I'm going to bait you to try and play something here. I mean, unless you have a hard bargain that I can't pay for, if Dhawally commits something to try and save his Darius, whether that's a pump, whether that's 2 spells, if you can do that here to pump the Darius,
that's the dream.
That would be disastrous, given what we know of Prismaticism's hand. So we are going to commit something. Oh, it's a rebuke of his own. Onto that long-sworded mech. That's going to get bounced back. I assume we bounce to Darius here, but not necessarily the only line, but to the top of the hand it goes.
I think I was going to say,
be committed.
I think this should be safe now just because there's enough runes up where even if Dhawally repeated hard bargain, Prismaticism could pay for it.
Yep. I like this play. So Spinning Axe is going to go away. Darius goes back to hand. It's a very expensive unit to replay, and Prismaticism threatening to win once more. Discards a flash.
There is another story to be told here.
A new card.
Because Dhawally played his own rebuke, and then Prismaticism bounces the Darius back. The rebuke obviously forced Dhawally to recycle 2 runes. Darius has a power cost as well. And when I was saying that you really just want to limit options, even after channeling and going to 6, Dhawally needs to be able to double conquer because Prismaticism is holding both spots and it's looking to hold to win. And I don't think on 6 runes the options are going to be available. So I think that Prismaticism saw the recycle. Yes.
Shaking the hand, Prismaticism 11-1 to Dhawally. Oh, that hand is awfully clunky. Falling Star cannot get it done. The longsword equip actually helping out. There is a Mind Splitter. I guess it's coming in from the sideboard these days. I was wondering what that was. I thought it was a bonus to Rebuke. Flash, Cleave, and that is enough as Prismaticism masterfully guides through. Not a mirror match, but at least a matching domain matchup, and looks awfully prepared for the most represented deck here in Atlanta.
Yeah, that was just kind of a masterclass, in my opinion, from Prismaticism, because this is playing against the deck that is the most represented, playing against the deck that many feel is still potentially the most powerful in the format, and playing against a former regional qualifier winner. And Prismaticism, of course, made it look easy in many ways, knew exactly what to do, and Dhawally no slouch. So this is somebody who has a plan, has been executing it. And like I said before, the fact that Game 1 and Game 2 were almost identical starts says that these players know exactly what it takes to win, and they're just going to follow their script until something breaks.
I mean, Priz also arguably the player that has played the most Draven. Like, has a best of Draven card. Did top 8 on RQ in Bologna actually in Vegas as well on Draven. So knows that very well. Still a deck he could have piloted here in the same domains, a style he clearly likes. Even though it's not the Miracle version, would have been more than comfortable on a more mid-range deck. Decides that actually, you know what? I like these domains, but I don't like this Legend as much. I'd rather play Annie. I think that's what will make me more successful in this field. And given the how much Draven is in the meta, given his results in not just this week, but last week, hard to argue with Prismaticism right now, who is your player to watch moving into the top 8. And at this point, very likely to make it there again.
Yeah, I'm just happy that we finally got Prismaticism on the broadcast, because made me look smart. Thank you, Prismaticism. Thank you, because I've been singing the praises all weekend long, and now you got to see exactly why.
Yep, but Rexha Breach is never coming back. If anyone wants to know, it's just never making it back in. There's none left. I mean, again, X2, again, I'm not good at standings math, so do not look to me for any of that. That is something I will leave to the professionals.
We should ask Kangas.
We should ask
I hear Kangas is great at math.
What if he's low-key really good at standings math? That's like his one thing. I'd love it. Honestly, Kangas, if you're out there, you let us know. We are getting close, so that is round 12 in the books, more or less. Some matches perhaps still finishing, but we only have one round left of Swiss for our top 8, and we're getting awfully close to having only 8 players left in this 1,500 or so player tournament.
It is hard to believe that we're already there. I honestly feel like the event just started. It has flown by. The games have been great. The community has been awesome. When we've talked to people out here on the floor, everything has just been a wonderful time. And so it really is hard to think that we are one round away from our top 8.
And again, a lot of exciting things to look at. I don't have the updated standings yet. I'm so curious. Whoever gets to check the standings next is going to be in for a treat, because the number of potential X1 players, the number of different legends they could be playing. I mean, I have to say, for all the storylines we've tracked, Prismaticism, excellent one. Can't wait to hear from him in a moment in a winner's interview, I'm sure. But I really want to know if Set's going to make it. I have to imagine at this point, Colin is already locked for the best of, but it's got to be a little bit better than that, I feel like.
I think that's a fair assessment. It would be difficult for me to think that
there's a better set player in the room.
There's a better set player at the moment. That being said, we know after day 1 that there were only 3 decided best ofs, so there was at least a player in play.
Yeah, 25 other legends still up in the air as the tournament is going, as the rest of them battle for the best of here on day number 2. I also just realized, by the way, there is a Jinx also floating around X1. Again, don't know what the result was, but we could have the same domains represented in top 8 by 3 different legends, which I'm very confident in saying I don't think that has ever happened before in a regional qualifier.
And I'm sure that the community would take that in stride. There would be no problems with that whatsoever. The sky would not be falling. It very well could happen. I think that it still would not necessarily be an indictment on the meta, because at the end of the day, the thing I think folks need to remember is we've seen a lot of legends perform very well. It is difficult to make the top 8. Yes, you have to be an incredibly skilled player, and what I'm about to say is not meant to take anything away from them. But any good player will also tell you kind of need a little luck to go your way from time to time. And so sometimes the chips just fall in a direction where you'll get 6 Fury Chaos.
There's a famous phrase in card games, and I'm sure many other avenues of life: it is better to be lucky than good. And if you're trying to win a card game tournament, you best be both. That's basically the conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
All right, with that, we do have an interview ready with our winner of our last round. Let's hear from the man himself, Prismaticism.
Thanks so much for the pass. I cannot believe we got 2 heavy hitters in this second to last round here of Swiss. The Houston regional champion versus a 3 times top-cutting player in yourself, Prismat. You now also have 2 best ofs, and if you get this one, it's your 3rd one, correct?
Yeah, it will be my 3rd one.
Which, as far as I'm keeping track so far, that will be the highest amount that people have.
I'll be tied with Alan.
Yeah, exactly.
Alan's still playing for his, so I'm still catching up to that guy. He's pretty good.
No, absolutely. So here's the big thing. I just saw you last week in Lille. You had an amazing performance, obviously not the win that you wanted to lock in, but you are now on your way to now your 4th top cut. Please, please, please gush about Annie. We've already seen her win a regional qualifier back in Origins, and now you've not only shown that she still can compete and even post bans with a lot of hits to these 2 domains. How and why?
Well, after the bans, I was looking for a deck. I had a lot of ideas. Annie was one of them. I tested her out. Alan's my main testing partner, so I test a lot against Ezreal. And it's sort of the idea where if the deck's good enough to beat Alan, or at least go 50-50 with him, it's probably a pretty good deck. But I think it was the first week after the bans, I was actually having some trouble beating him with Annie, but that was with an older build, was not as refined. I switched to Aurelia. I was trying that out for a week. I found that the mirror match was just not very skill intensive. I really just wanted to avoid that as much as possible. And it felt like it was still pretty, and it would still have an advantage in other matchups, but still pretty draw dependent deck overall. Pretty reliant on the Celicorn herders. So on the Sunday weekend before Lille, I switched back to Annie. There was an event in Toronto that I played at, and then went through that, did really well there. Was like, okay, I'm locking in this deck. It has a lot of unfair turns. It's the best Forerunner deck in the game, where I get to play the Forerunner, immediately protect it with Flash. That's a lot of value there.
We saw it literally in that match.
Yeah,
really
well, it got hard bargains twice.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is, even if that happens, you're so far ahead on tempo from the early game that you have the time to just play it again. And your opponent, they're not going to have the second rebuke, second hard bargain. Well, they could, but very, very unlikely.
Well, it's just like you said. I mean, you know that how good and that pushing that is. And Dhawally 100% respects that. He knows that you need to hard bargain, that you have to exchange these resources in the correct way. And I thought it was an impeccable match, regardless of the actual end result of the 2-0. You two, every single game and every single movement y'all made is inches on each other. Like you said, I mean, it really shows. And what I want to kind of really pitch, you brought about your playtest partner with Alan.
Yeah.
How many hours have you spent playing Riftbound right now, and how much time it has taken to be as prolific as you are?
I mean, I have no idea. Like back in set 1, early set 2, me and Alan were doing like 10-hour days together. After the bans, we were not doing quite as much testing, but still doing a decent amount, like 3 or 4 hours a day, figuring stuff out, and then also playing at locals as well to get a little bit more variety of the practice. But total number of hours, I mean, easily 4 digits. And if you count like the time thinking about the game and outside of just playing, at maybe 5, I don't know.
Wow. All right, my last question, but it's not going to be just for you. I actually have a special guest here that I want to ask this question to. You first, Prismat. How does it feel to now have swapped legends and having success with them as our Annie winner in Dhawally, Draven best of, now having changed places? How do you feel about having now this kind of dual rivalry identity?
I mean, it's pretty cool. Dhawally's an amazing player. I still got to get the win to match up with him. But yeah, red-purple is really good.
That's true. Thoughts, Dhawally?
Yeah, so in Origins, everyone was like, Kai'Sa's best deck. We brought Annie and crushed. And then this time, everyone's like, oh, Draven's busted, Aurelia's busted. He brings Annie and crushes. I'm sitting there wishing it was me. Like, but you know what? I had a good time. It's fun. He's a really, you're a powerful opponent. Like, I sit down across from him. It's like, what the, and it was a rough match for me. And I think your deck is busted, and I hope you win the tournament. So, yeah.
2 incredible players, an incredible match for both of you. I look forward to seeing more of your faces, not just later today, but the rest of future regional qualifiers. Thanks for the great insight. We're going to send it back.